So for this third and final video for 7.5, these steps are basically putting it all together. So we worked through factoring, crossing out like we did way back in Unit 6 with 6.1, but that was the first step when graphing. And then we said find the RD, and we went over those steps with identifying what cancels out, setting equal to 0, substitute back in. VA, set the denominator equal to 0. And then as far as your horizontal asymptote, slant asymptote, we mentioned that at the beginning of the part 1 video, finding the X and Y intercepts, or where it intersects. You can use a calculator to find the table of values, or you can use the graphing calculator to kind of check all of this stuff. So that Desmos.com calculator is very useful, so I would highly recommend you guys using that. Let's jump right in. So example 1, in order to find the RD, or the holes in the graph, we are looking to see, does anything cancel out? So if we look up here, there's really nothing that can factor, nothing cancels out. So for that one, we just would say none. There's not a hole in the graph. So this will be continuous. Then when it comes to the vertical asymptote, what you're going to do there with the vertical asymptote is, that's the ones where we said set denominator equal to 0. So we have x plus 2, we set it equal to 0, so x equals -2. All right, and then your horizontal asymptote, this is where you got to pay attention to your exponents. So in this case, we have an exponent of 1 and 1. So the values are the same. So if you remember in Coach Parker's video, we had the exponents are the same, and that would be the ones where you are going to divide the coefficients. So in this case, our coefficients are 2 and 1. So 2 over 1 is simply 2. So that means our horizontal asymptote is +2. All right, then your X-intercepts, you're going to try to identify where those are by whether it crosses the X-axis. All right, and in order to find that where it crosses the X-axis and the Y-axis, for the X-intercept, you set the numerator equal to 0. All right, so if we are setting our numerator equal to 0, we come up here, we have 2x minus 1 equals 0. And if we are having 2x minus 1 equals 0, then we would want to add 1, so 2x equals 1, divide by 2, so x equals 1/2. All right, so your X-intercept would be where the x value is 1/2, and if it's an intercept, then the y has got to be 0. All right, as far as your Y-intercept, that is where you are going to set the x value equal to 0. And so if we put a 0, let's just work that to the left here. 2 times 0 minus 1 over 0 plus 2. 2 times 0 is 0, so that leaves us with a -1 up top. And then 0 plus 2 is 2. So this would be a -1/2. So when then it comes to the domain, we want to list out what we've got there as far as our values. Since we didn't have an RD, that was none, then our domain is going to use the more simple template here, or I guess the one without the coordinate pair in the middle. So we know we got to fill in those blanks, and we're looking to fill in those blanks. The blank is always going to be your vertical asymptote, so this is -2, -2. All right, let's look at one more example. So example 2, this one will factor, so we can kind of see how to find the holes in the graph. So this would be x plus 4 and x minus 2. So because we have an x plus 4 and an x plus 4, those are going to cancel out. So that leaves us with 1 over x minus 2 for our simplified version. In order to find your RD, you take what canceled out, and you set that canceled piece equal to 0. So we have an x plus 4 that we're setting equal to 0. So subtract 4, subtract 4. So that means the first part of this is a -4. Then we substitute that in to our x's. In this case, we only have one of them. So then we would be left with a 1 over -4 minus 2. -4 minus 2 is -6. So this would be 1 over -6, or you could just say -1 over 6. All right, then when it comes to our vertical asymptote, that's where we set our denominator equal to 0. So in this case, we have x minus 2, so denominator equals 0. So for our x minus 2 equals 0, you add 2, so x equals 2. And then for your horizontal asymptote, you would take the exponents, and in this case, we would have a 1 up top and a 2 on the bottom. So that one, it would be where it's bigger on bottom. So if you remember that, bigger on bottom than y equals 0, so babyo. So that means y would equal 0. So that labels 3 of our blanks and kind of fills those in. The x-intercepts, so that's where the numerator should be set equal to 0. All right, so our original numerator was an x plus 4, but then when we canceled it out, our numerator was a 1, so that would make this none. So it means it's not going to cross the x and y axis, or excuse me, the x axis, and then the y axis is where you would set the x equal to 0. So we know this is 0, and if we put in a 0 for x and try to solve that out, so that means that we would have a 1 over 0 minus 2, which is just 1 over 2, so minus. All right, so a negative 1/2. And then when it comes to our domain, this one we did have an RD and a VA, so we're going to have our longer template. All right, and we know our numbers are the x from our hole in the graph, and then we have our vertical asymptote, or our 2. So we take the smaller of the 2, which is a negative 4, and write that first, and then take the larger of the 2, which is 2, and write that next. All right, so for this one, we are also going to address end behavior and graph it. So the end behavior, you look at the horizontal asymptote, and the horizontal asymptote is at 0. So that means those are also going to be 0 for approaching negative infinity and positive infinity. And then when it comes to your vertical asymptote, we said that's at 2. So we got a dotted line there at 2. And then what we're looking to identify is what the outline or shape is going to be, and that's by, is this a positive or a negative graph? And so in this case, we have a positive, so we are going to be approaching this way. All right, now if you are trying to say, well, you know, what about the hole in the graph? Well, yeah, we'll need to include that. So let's take a look at negative 4 and then negative 1 over 6. So we go negative 4, so we're here, and then down just a little bit here. So really right about there would be a hole in our graph. So let's kind of put this together with our hole here. So we're really, there you go. And then we're working our way back down. The x-intercept, there should be none because we're at 0. The y-intercept should be at 0 and negative 1/2. So if we're 0 and negative 1/2 intersect, so we go over here, we got a 0 and then negative 1/2, and so we're okay there. We're in the right spot. All right, so you guys try number 3, and hopefully you got this at this point.